Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming along today to this session on personalised learning through technology. Just to introduce myself very quickly, I'm Terry Freedman. What we're going to do, Miles and I, is such a vast topic that what we've decided to do is explore various aspects of it. And our aim is that hopefully by the end of the session you'll have several ideas and resources and references that you can follow through afterwards. Just to warn you, I don't think we're going to have time for questions, but if we do, if we somehow manage to finish a little bit early and we wish to ask questions, we'd be delighted to take them. The only thing I would like to warn you about is that we are recording this session, so if you need to say something controversial, you may prefer to use the name of an absent colleague instead of your own. Now, there's no need to scribble at all. I seem to have accidentally touched this. Hold on. How do I get back? Oh, right. Sorry, I'm not used to Macs. I'm used to real computers. I'll leave now. You don't have to, well, you can write stuff down if you want to, but you don't have to because the presentations will be up there. My one isn't there yet because we were tweaking it at the last minute, but it should be there by tonight or tomorrow. And we're also recording a podcast of this session, as I just said, so with any luck, you'll be able to listen to that as well. Now, just before we go any further, we'll just introduce ourselves. Okay, that's me. I won't go into any huge detail on that. You can see it there. If you wish to find out more about me, there's the website reference there. A couple of things I would like to draw your attention to. Miles and I are presenting under the auspices of Naace, which is, you could say, the ICT Subject Association of this country. And Naace are represented here. Last year I was the chair of Naace. And later on, I'll be mentioning a free book called Coming of Age, An Introduction to the New World Wide Web. So in case I forget to tell you then, you can find that on my website as well. I'm now going to hand over to Miles, who'll tell you a little bit about himself, and then he's going to talk about learning journeys and learning landscapes.
Hi, I'm the head of Alton Convent Prep, which is an independent 220-strong co-ed school for 3 to 11-year-olds in Hampshire. But before taking on headship, I used to teach maths and ICT in the independent sector, doing some fairly pioneering work with primary VLEs, blogging, as well as contributing to open source projects like Moodle, like ALG and Edubuntu. I'm still involved with the EdTech world through organisations like the British Computer Society, MirandaNet, and of course Naace, for whom Terry and I, as he says, are presenting today. Before we get to grips with personalisation, I'd like to spend a little time thinking about the notion of curriculum as journey. Here's a map of a 19th century journey. It's a strip map of the journey from London to Dover. We've got a very clear representation of the journey, a clear statement of where we're travelling from and the destination we're heading to, together with the more significant places we're travelling to along the road. Not very flexible, but perfectly adequate for getting to the place that we want to go. Well, it's a 19th century map, perhaps going hand in hand with a 19th century picture of curriculum. Things now, of course, are very different. Here's Google's version of the same journey. So perhaps things haven't actually moved on that far. The miracle of technology giving us the most efficient route from where we are to where we want to go, but still a linear model of the journey. Of course, technology is capable of far more than this. Who's got one of these in their car? A scattering of hands. Okay, amazing things, these GPS boxes. Within a matter of minutes, the box knows exactly where you are. It has your profile. And you get to tell it exactly where you want to go. You get to personalise your route there. And it will then work out the best possible route, adapting its recommended route depending on what happens to you as you travel along on your journey. Which is fine if you're interested in getting just to a particular place. There's more than one way to get to Dover, though. And for some, it's the journey itself, which is at least as interesting as the destination. There's plenty of Kent to explore on the way. And part of the fun for any journey is down to the people who one travels with. rather than just getting to the destination as quickly as you can. The view from Google's satellite, however, is not how things appear to the travellers themselves. It's great to have that overview, particularly if one's keen to explore or you're in the business of advising others on their route. But things look rather different to the traveller on the ground, who can only see as far as perhaps the next turning, together with occasional glimpses of the distant horizon. 4 different ways of thinking about journeys, and I think 4 different ways of thinking about the curriculum, and thus its personalisation. Everyone following the same programme of study, each perhaps at their own pace. A curriculum that's adapted to the learner, tailored to their individual profile. Curriculum seen as a network of interconnected parts through which the learner can find their own way, guided perhaps by those having that overview or those who care for the learner. Or a curriculum centred around the learner themselves, where opportunities, challenges, resources and people are immediately available. Terry, would you like to say a bit about what personalisation is?
Personalisation is an absolutely huge topic, and the interesting thing is, when I was preparing for this talk, I wrote down a list of aspects, components, if you like, of personalisation, and I got to around 13, and then Miles came up with some that I hadn't even thought of. So then I thought, well, I'll see what kind of good practice is going on the internet. So I put out some feelers on the internet and said, examples of really good practice in personalised learning. I mean, I have got some to share with you, but not from the internet. Because the responses I got were worrying. Some people said personalisation, and that they didn't mean it as a philosophical question, okay? And they weren't all from abroad, they were from this country. So we've had personalised learning as a term for 4 years, and some people were saying, what's that? Some people were very vague. They said, oh yeah, you can do that with blogs, which is true, but it doesn't help anyone who doesn't know what it is and doesn't know what a blog is. There were quite a few people who said, oh yeah, I've been doing that for years. So we call it differentiation. Well, in fact, I think these days, we've got a much more sophisticated view of what personalisation is. And I think there are 3 broad areas we can look at. The first one is this list here, which the DFES, as it was then, came up with a few years ago. Now, the interesting thing about that is that there's only one bit that you could say is differentiation in the traditional sense of the word. The idea of differentiation doesn't really help anyone, because any decent teacher will always try and make it so that all the pupils in their class can access the curriculum, okay? We have to take that as a given. So it's much more than that. And the DFES, quite rightly, in my view, identified various aspects, including what I suppose would be considered quite radical things, like what about the curriculum itself? The interesting thing about all of these is that it looks on there as a PowerPoint slide. It's just very, very linear. But all of these actually interact with each other. If I just give you a very, very simple example, assessment for learning relies partially on data. We'll come on to that in the near future. It relies partially on good data relating to each individual child. Well, if the school is organised in such a way that it can't provide that data, it can't provide, ultimately, effective assessment for learning. As another example, and I don't think any of this is rocket science, if the space in which the learners are meant to be learning aren't very conducive to learning, you're not going to get effective teaching and learning. I mean, it's all very, very simple, but I think it's one of these things you think, oh, now that someone said it, it's obvious. And that's why I think the DFES did a good job here. There are other things going on as well, I think. First of all, the technology has changed quite a bit, as you know. I would say, in a nutshell, we've now got technology that stands a reasonably good chance of delivering our aspirations as far as personalised learning is concerned. It doesn't have to be as labour intensive or as restricted as it may have been, let's say, 20 years ago. You've got mobile computing, you've got access to handheld computing. Wi-Fi is fairly ubiquitous, so much so that I was in Glasgow in September, and there's one cafe there that is its unique selling point, which it sells itself on. It's got a big sign up saying Wi-Fi free. Another important thing, I think, is society's expectations, because people often use the term, distinguish between education and the so-called real world, which is a little bit of a false distinction, I think. But even to the extent that it may once have been true, it certainly isn't anymore. Because in the real world, so-called, personalisation is the norm. And it doesn't matter where you look, whether you're talking about people buying books on Amazon, where you get the message which says people who bought this book also bought some, these other books, whether it's designing Nike trainers, whether it's accessing local services in your local government. Personalisation has become the norm. And I don't think it's feasible to expect any school to cocoon itself from that. And taking all these things into consideration, what I would say is that the challenge for personalised learning is no longer a technological one. I don't even think it's an economic one, certainly not in this country. I think it's more to do with attitudes and more to do with management. And I just think that if schools, local authorities, various levels of systems were to say we are going to have personalised learning, that is our vision, and this is how we're going to do it, we have everything in place to do it with. So I'm now going to hand over to Miles, who's going to talk about key tasks.
I think it's interesting to look through some of the background to personalisation, and that's a notion that extends far beyond the realm of English schools, to take in the broader realm of public services here, and partly thanks to the advancing technology, to many spheres of life. Ledbetter's paper for Naace back in 2004 set much of the agenda for personalisation across the public sector. Ledbetter saw that for the state to deliver better and better services would require people to become far more active participants in the design and delivery of those services. As Terry said, personalisation is capable of multiple interpretations, some of which are on Ledbetter's continuum on the street, himself favouring a deep personalisation in which the state promotes greater capacity for self-management and self-organisation. For education, Ledbetter saw this in terms of encouraging the children to become more involved in making decisions about what they would like to learn and how. This sort of personalisation is summed up neatly as being about both choice and voice. I think it's interesting that as early as 2004, the then DFES was seeing choice and voices at the heart of their policy making. That said, it looked to many as though the user of the education system were the parents rather than children at this point. It's all too easy to see personalisation purely in terms of a highly individualised approach to education. This would fail to acknowledge that essentially education is a social process. We learn as part of a community. It's significant that in the E strategy, one of the aims was the development of a collaborative approach to personalised learning. And it's in the E strategy that we see the vision of the personal online space, initially perhaps as the portfolio. Later in 2005, these themes were echoed in the school's white paper, with personalisation understood as a tailored education, but one acknowledging not only pupils' aptitudes, but also their interests and the commitment to providing all learners with their own personal online space for this year, for 2008, something which it's worth keeping in focus as we now see the rollout of learning platforms across the state sector. Much at the same time, Future Lab, who've done some super work in this area, published an excellent report on personalisation and digital technology, of which the Learners' Charter formed part. The report articulated very clearly how emerging digital technology could make a significant contribution to reshaping the education system around the needs of the learner through the 4 key areas that they indicate. A year ago, the Magistrates Chief Inspector Christine Gilbert and her team did a splendid job of reconciling the individual tailoring, the choice, the voice implicit in personalisation with our present education system, with its national curriculum, high-stakes assessment and all the rest, placing an emphasis on assessment for learning and the other themes that Terry and I will be touching on. The quotes behind me are, I'll admit, selective ones, but it's important to note that Gilbert does see a place for collaboration, including peer tutoring, and for learner voice that goes far beyond the usual remit of school councils. I'm going to hand back to Terry now to look at how all of this links in with Every Child Matters.
Thank you. Now, the really nice thing is, and I'm sure it's more by accident than design, is that all of these policies, like the 2020 Vision Report, the Every Child Matters agenda, personalisation, the other one Miles mentioned, which I've forgotten about, what's it, the E-strategy, they all actually tie in with each other. I'm sure it was accidental. Anyway, Every Child Matters. That's, as you probably know, that's been on the agenda now for a few years. It's now explicit in the self-evaluation form that Ofsted looks at for schools. Sorry, I'm technically challenged. This one, is it?
If you use this one, it moves on out.
Oh, right. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Those are the attributes of Every Child Matters. Now, I've changed the order from the official order because if you look at the highlighted words, they spell the word shape. This one, is it? Oh, this one. Sorry. I mean, no, I've already said that. 1 minute move on.
Hold on. Sorry, folks. There you go.
Right, okay, thank you. Sorry, okay, so shape. Now, how can ICT tie in with all of these and tie in with personalisation? Well, just to give you a few examples, if you take something like staying safe, an obvious answer is that you probably need to have internet filtering in place because you don't have to be a psychologist to work out that if you don't feel safe or if you feel stressed or worried, you can't actually effectively learn. You can't learn effectively, I should say, going back to the DFES list. Going a little bit deeper, we should be teaching kids how to actually be safe online. What about making a positive contribution? Well, as I mentioned earlier, some people said, oh, you can do that with blogs without going into any great detail. Well, there's a teacher called Drew Buddy in this country, and he uses blogs, or rather he gets his students to use blogs in order to evaluate their work as they're going along. And hopefully this will work. One of his students kept losing her work, and she wrote about it in a blog. Has it gone away again?
You've gone into menu mode.
How did I do that?
No, this one. There you go.
Sorry. I'll give you a minute to read that while I quickly read the manual for this computer. Okay, so you've got the idea. Basically, this girl is using Word and it kept going wrong. I know it's highly unlikely. She kept losing her work and in the end she got it back. And you might think, well, okay, so what? That's happened to everyone. I think she's remarkably self-possessed. I mean, I go into a rant whenever this happens. But the interesting thing is, I think it's an example of what you might call meta-learning, in a sense. She's actually stopping to think about what she's doing. She's come across a problem. She's tried to overcome it. She said, in effect, how she's overcome it. So it's actually all part of her progress. There's someone else as well called Steve Beard. He's an ICT advisor in Shropshire, and he's very active in Second Life, or rather active in promoting Second Life. And he was saying to me a few weeks ago, I bumped into him in a meeting, he was saying that Second Life is absolutely fantastic to get kids to make a positive contribution, in the sense of contributing to discussions and everything, because they're completely anonymous. You can, of course, achieve a similar thing just using wikis and forums as well. You can take the shyest kid in the class and they will come alive in these kind of environments. Now, another thing, if we go back to the previous list, one of the things was staying healthy. Well, again, I don't think I'm stretching a point too much to say that we've got so much in the way of wireless, Wi-Fi, mobile computing and all of that kind of thing, that if the weather permits, it should be quite nice for kids to work outside rather than all being stuck in a stuffy classroom all the time. Okay. In other words, I think a lot of this is very enabling. Let's see if this will work now. Oh, yeah. Now, I just wanted to say, you might wonder how any of this could tie in with economic well-being, but there are websites. There's one called halfbakery.com, I think it is. I've got the reference in the thing. And the idea there is that you can have a half-formed idea, half-formed idea, and put it up in this forum to see what other people think of it. And then you can start to develop the idea and use feedback. If you look in the ICT programme of study, feedback is at all levels, especially the higher levels of the programme of study. Okay, feedback is really important. One of these people, just to give you an idea, has suggested that what we need is a spoonerism spell checker, so an automatic algorithm that as soon as you type something, it will turn the letters round, you see. I don't know why. I mean, I personally don't need this. I do it naturally. But presumably it could work the other way around as well, like reverse spoonerism. That would be good. There's another one called Why Not? And the really interesting thing about this is that back in 2003, someone suggested that what we need are digital cameras that will record the GPS data of where the picture was taken. Okay, that's 4 years ago, and they're actually now coming out. So I would think that would contribute to economic well-being, because hopefully this person took out some kind of patent on the idea, rather than watch lots of people making money off it. You get the idea. Now, if a school was to be brave enough, what it could do, that's Miles' slide, sorry, I'll go back. If a school was to be brave enough, what they could do is they could take the idea of the Web 2 technology, the fact that you get feedback, take the idea of these kind of websites where you can get feedback from complete strangers, take the idea of self-evaluation and actually construct a curriculum, a local curriculum, or even a school-based curriculum, where it would be completely personalised. If you think about something like this, if a student has got a particular passion, a particular interest, they could actually follow that through. I would almost guarantee, I don't wish to completely guarantee it because I'm being recorded here, I would almost guarantee that if you were to take that approach, you could probably tick all of the boxes on the national curriculum. The self-evaluation, all of the various things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Miles now, who's going to talk more about the technology that underpins all of this. Sorry.
Yeah. I'd like to look briefly at 4 aspects of the technology that are particularly relevant to the integrated approach to children's care and education that's at the heart of Every Child Matters. Firstly, the use of technology to support greater engagement of parents and carers in their children's education. Communication is at the heart of this. And it's interesting to see how well many schools are already using technologies like targeted mailings, SMS messaging, and in more than one case, call centres to keep parents informed about their children's education, in addition to the use of school websites as a hub for the wider school community. Communication, of course, is a two-way process, and it will be interesting to see how schools take on board notions of feedback from and responsiveness to their clients, both pupils and parents. RateMyTeachers.com might yet have something useful to teachers. Providing parents with access to data about their child's education is already happening in many schools, mainly at broad brush level of assessment grades, targets, behaviour and attendance. But much more becomes possible as the use of virtual learning environments, personal online spaces, becomes the medium for more learning. Access to last night's homework grades makes possible intervention far earlier than half-termly grades or annual reports. The VLE also has the potential to allow parents to access the resources used in class, their children's work, and even podcasts or videos of the lessons. As Jim Wright mentioned this morning, this real-time reporting envisaged in the children's plan is something we'll be seeing introduced over the next couple of years. There are, of course, privacy issues here that need addressing. Providing parents with access to their children's own work is one thing. Letting them follow or participate in online discussions involving the whole class is quite another. Parents and pupils are comfortable with teachers discussing marks and exercise books at parents' evenings. Less so, I suspect, with parents regularly sitting in on lessons. I think one central aspect of the personal online space has to be the e-portfolio. Somewhere the learner may store all their work in digital form. Crucial here is access to the space from wherever the learner happens to be. Yes, in the IT room, but also at home, from the library, and in time from each classroom, and even perhaps from field trips and school buses via smartphones or PDAs. An e-portfolio, though, while centered on the student themselves, is there for others too, for teachers, for the other learners in class, as a way of providing access to work for parents, and in due course, for providing a body of evidence to examiners and future employers, giving learners a much clearer sense of writing for an audience. Whilst web access to the file server, or indeed trusty USB sticks, can provide the storage space, something more sophisticated like ALG's open source learning landscape provides the granularity of access control necessary to serve these multiple audiences, as well as allowing learners to narrate the content for others and comment on and link to work. As the web becomes the medium for more and more learning, it will be increasingly important that learners have their own device or devices with which to access this, whenever and wherever they need to. A couple of sessions a week in the school IT room really won't do anymore. In our pilot study of a primary VLE, we leveraged the parents' home computers to provide this access. There's really cool stuff being done using handheld devices. Negroponte's One Laptop Per Child project, and there are examples of this up in the software village, I think somewhere around 105. Negroponte's One Laptop Per Child project has started from first principles to produce a really innovative, low-cost bit of kit, the ideas behind which may yet find their way into the developed world. I was delighted to learn that the government are now serious about addressing digital divide issues, like that 1 million children don't have access to a computer at home. There's only about half that have broadband access. If we're really to make the most of what computing and communication can do to support and extend learning, seamless access to online spaces and learning platforms from home is essential. Jim Knight's announcement this morning of home internet access for all pupils is just what's needed. Alongside this political commitment, technological advances will help to make this a reality. Again, the One Laptop Per Child project is an imaginative solution to the connectivity problem, with wireless networking set up to piggyback connectivity from others of these EXO laptops in a daisy chain reaching back to the hub in the school. It's clever stuff.
Assessment for learning is a term you may have heard of. We should pronounce it assessment for learning as opposed to assessment of learning. So it's a little bit like what may once have been referred to as formative assessment, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. It's all to do with giving feedback, individual feedback to the child. And obviously from that description, you probably recognise that the Gilbert Review advocated it in the 2020 vision, is about personalisation. Now, it was also emphasised in the 5-year strategy of the DFES a few years ago. And again, none of this has to be rocket science. Some schools are doing some marvellous stuff in a very, very simple way. There's one school, for example, that has what it calls a golden book. And this so-called golden book contains the children's best work. So who decides what is the children's best work? Well, it's the children. I say children because it's a primary school. And they select the work they like, they think is best. They take a photo of it or scan it in, and it goes in this golden book. So the idea is, at a later stage, or when parents come, or whatever, they can look through that book and actually see their progress. I've got a reference to the DFES report that this was in at the end, so you can read about it in more detail. The thing about ICT now is it makes available a whole range of different forms of feedback mechanism. Okay, you've got the half bakery type thing that I mentioned earlier. One of the things that kids like about blogs and YouTube when they post up their own stuff is that people respond. Okay, that there's a real audience there. Now, if I go on just a little bit, I won't go into these in any great detail, but that's if you like, a summary of what assessment for learning is all about. When I say deep questioning, I mean not saying, as I heard in one school I inspected, where the teacher said to a pupil, "Do you understand spreadsheet modelling?" And the kid said yes, and he said, "Oh good, we'll move on." That is not deep questioning, okay? Now, if you want a couple of really good references on this, look up Black and Williams, or it may be Williams and Black on the internet. It's a pamphlet called Inside the Black Box. Excellent stuff. 10 years old now, still relevant. There's a new book that's come out, pamphlet, which I have put in the references here, which is called ICT, Inside the Black Box. So it's all about assessment for learning with regard to ICT. It's really good stuff, and it's really thin. You can read it on the bus. Now, I think I'm now handing over to Miles, who's going to talk about technological underpinnings of assessment for learning.
Thanks, Terry.
The power of the digital technology in helping pupils, teachers, school leaders to use assessment to inform future learning is immense, and I think we're only scratching the surface at present. Assessment for learning is about feed forward as well as feedback, and the then Secretary of State Ruth Kelly captured something of this in her introduction to the E strategy, outlining the potential of the online space to make recommendations and suggestions to the learners to the next stage in their learning journey, whilst I'd hope still allowing the learner the autonomy of choice. Sort of recommendation is something which we're becoming increasingly familiar with through the growth of Web 2 technology. The use of folksonomy tagging to blog posts, photos, videos, bookmarks, etc. makes it easy to find related items. YouTube does this so well. Watch a video clip and then YouTube uses tags and user data to recommend other videos you might enjoy. Similarly, Amazon's recommendations for the next book, or in my case DVD, you might wish to purchase. How hard would it be to extend this technology to learning objects inside the VLE? One of the joys of Web 2, though, is the way that these suggestions extend to the social network, with RSS keeping one up to date on the latest posts from all your contacts. As the content of Web 2 is generated by the users themselves, the sense of learning as part of a community from and alongside others becomes more apparent than ever. The use of peer ratings and comments and genuinely collaborative work through wikis in education are being explored and developed by many educators at the cutting edge. The reason why YouTube, Amazon and the like are good at this is down to the vast amount of data that they're effectively mining. Data mining is at the core of Google's success as a search engine and something the credit card people and supermarkets are increasingly relying on. The data generated through pupils' use of VLEs and e-portfolios goes way beyond the assessment and demographic data in the MIS. There's a similar potential to support decision-making in schools at all levels. And I hope that in time the developers are going to introduce tailor-made tools to facilitate this analysis inside the VLE. Berners-Lee's vision of the semantic web takes these ideas a stage further, with the web itself becoming a database where the machines themselves can work with the content in a way far beyond simple hyperlinks, where we would see a seamless integration of content, resources, activities from multiple sources, intelligently adapting to the ever-changing profile of the learner. Something perhaps a little like sat-nav for the learning journey. I'll give you a moment just to copy down the diagram there.
Thank you. Just a few words about the curriculum. I'm one of these mad people that actually thinks the curriculum in this country is incredibly flexible, but lots of people don't think it is. So the secondary curriculum has been changed from September 2008, and the whole emphasis is on flexibility. There's this marvellous quote from Gareth Mills, who's in the QCA, who's been one of the driving forces of all this, and I'll just put that on the screen. The top quote, I really love that. How do we shift from a view of the national curriculum to our national curriculum? You know, how do you get this sense of ownership? Now, some schools are doing it, and you've probably heard of this kind of thing before. There are schools, like there's one in Saxmundham, that every so often they suspend the timetable for a day, and they have all the kids working on a particular activity. In this case, or one of the activities, is where the kids have to do a PowerPoint presentation in order to apply for a loan from the bank manager. Then they have to email it to him or her. Okay, it's not cutting edge ICT, but the point is it is a real world activity. And again, to go back to a point I made earlier, it is helping the school to tick all the boxes. And if you read that quote from the Gilbert Review, again, I think it tells us that we need to, if you like, expand our horizons when it comes to developing activities. I was chatting to someone at lunch and he was saying, it's absolutely true, we're no longer really in the situation where we can plan curriculum development for the next 5 years. You know, you say, well, I've done my curriculum now, and this will see me out to when I retire. It's almost a continuing process now. Now, we've already talked a little bit about social networking. Miles has mentioned about kids getting onto YouTube and so on and so forth. And in fact, one school actually tried using a social network to teach modern foreign languages. I can't actually give you the name of the school because it was done for an MA dissertation, and it was a, if you like, a pilot project, a research project. Now it's very interesting. If any of you are familiar with Ning, you'll recognise that as a Ning community. And what these Ning, N-I-N-G, what these communities allow you to do is to have members and outsiders, obviously. You can share videos, blogs, photos, you can comment, start discussions. It's all self-contained. And the interesting thing was, in the evaluation of this project, he said it worked really, really, really well. Okay, he was really pleased with it, but there were some issues. The biggest issue was the fact that because the department, the Modern Foreign Languages department, was working in isolation, it wasn't embedded in the culture of the school. And that seemed to have an effect on the quality of the work they were doing. And the other thing is, which you may find surprising, but in a sense I don't think I do, is that the students found it difficult at first to use. They actually needed training themselves. And everyone, or lots of people talk about digital natives as if kids are born with some kind of innate IT ability. I don't think it's true. And certainly in this case it wasn't true. Now, I'm just going to talk very, very quickly about this. Some examples of software, because I don't think you need to be thinking, oh, you know, social networking, we'll never get that in our school. There are other things you can do as well. And I was watching a podcast a few weeks ago on the subject of writer's block, which I actually didn't think existed, to be perfectly honest. But I thought, well, I've got the opposite problem, you know, I can't stop. So I thought, well, is there software that would actually help someone if they had writer's block? So I typed in Google writer's block, and I got this, which is fantastic. It's called Text Blocks. It doesn't address writer's block really, but what it does is it enables you to plan a publication using blocks rather than something like the word processing outline tool. And this is nice and visual, and I actually use this to produce a newsletter because you can do all the stuff in there, move it around, see what it looks like as a kind of visual structure. When you're happy, you click on export, exports it as a rich text file, then you can get on with the proper word processing, like spell checking and so on and so forth. And you may have come across something called VoiceThread. It's a free service, and I think not many people know this. If you're a teacher, even the professional service is free, so you don't have to pay. Got the reference again. And what you can do with this is upload photos, your digital photos, and instead of writing about them, you can actually speak about them, and then other people can add their comments. And again, it's a way that kids who perhaps aren't very good at writing or not confident can actually take a full part in this sort of thing.
Right. Okay, rather than concluding with more ways of using the technology, particularly the web to support formal and informal personalised learning, I'd like to explore just a few of the ways in which the technologies can support continuous professional development, another of Christine Gilbert's themes. There are, I think, clear parallels between our learning and that of our pupils. Thanks to the efficiency of search engines, we've seen, or at least are seeing, a cultural shift towards just-in-time problem-based learning, certainly the way many of us learn to use IT. What's the best way to teach fractions arithmetic? What would be a good assembly about New Year's resolutions? How are folk using blogging to support learning about poetry? There's no need to go on courses for these things anymore. Just type your question into Google and let the magic of PageRank do the rest. Superficial? Perhaps, but undoubtedly efficient. Photos, videos, text, presentations are all there on the net to access. In the case of Creative Commons content, adapt and reuse. Furthermore, Web 2 provides us with a chance to create and contribute, as well as consume. Uploaded presentations and videos, as well as Wikipedia entries, should deserve their place in any teacher's CPD portfolio. As well as these generic sites, a number of sites now exist to allow teachers to share educational resources with the wider community, such as the Times Ed's Resource Library and the Teacher Resource Exchange. This content sharing that some teachers are engaging in is also something we're starting to see at institutional level. MIT and the Open University are freely distributing vast swathes of their educational content, in the latter cases downloadable and adaptable Moodle courses. Similarly, Stanford University in the States now make many of its lectures available as podcasts straight into iTunes. And like the OU, content from their education faculty is available in this way. I wonder how long it will be before British schools freely share lesson recordings, resources, and schemes of work like this. I'm not alone in finding it sad that so few schools' learning platforms have no guest access available. I'm sure for all the right reasons. I make no apology that two of the examples I've cited are from the States. As Thomas Freedman, no relation? No, points out the world is flat. Distance is no longer an issue. Being able to participate in a worldwide cross-phase community of educators is something which the web has made possible for all of us now. It's a joy to see how traditional organisations, including schools and local authorities, have had professional discussions invigorated through the use of mailing lists and online discussion forums, again emphasising the sense of learning from and with one another. Conferences rather than courses, Naace being a case in point. More interesting still are the opportunities for shared and collaborative learning beyond organisational boundaries. The conversations, themes and memes in the educational blogosphere continue to be a great source of professional development for many, myself included, and things to which all are welcome to contribute their own insights and perspectives.
Thank you. Well, more or less as a last thing, let me just tell you a little bit about Naace. There you are, that's all the information. If you'd like to join or find out more, then they're on stand J45 at the show. And just once again to tell you, those are all the references. There's a fantastic section on learning environments, both virtual and physical, so do download the presentation, which you can do so from there. If you'd like to contact us, email us, we'd be delighted to hear from you. It'd be absolutely marvellous. Thank you very much.